You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Yeah, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm excited to introduce Elliott Greenwood. Elliott is a co-founder and head of business at CheckUp, and it's chckup. With a diverse entrepreneurial background, he has successfully started 4 businesses in unrelated industries. Prior to his current role, he gained experience in finance and investment at a mezzanine debt fund during his college years. When not shaping the future of healthcare, Elliott enjoys music, wine, and seeking out new adventures. Elliott, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Thanks for having me.
So CheckUp, tell us about it. What is it? What was where the idea came from, and what are you trying to build?
Yeah, so CheckUp started as something completely random to where we're at today, but that's, as you probably know, the entrepreneur's journey. It was myself and one of my co-founders were workshopping ideas with a mentor of ours, and what originally started as price comparison for human medicine through a lot of customer discovery and a lot of just going down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out what's an actual product that people will use. We switched to vet. We talked to a bunch of vets, and then we started to realize that there's probably just a better need for the software that they currently use. And then we thought we wanted to do a PIMS, but we realized that one of the things that a lot of veterinarians and people who work in practices hate the most is a lot of them are very opposed to switching what they currently do. So we just thought we'd slot right in, integrate with their current system, and that's kind of where we're at today. We're proud to say that we're in a handful of practices and ready to get into a bunch more, but we think we've built a pretty damn good product as of today.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Elliot. I was checking out your website, and one of the things that I really kind of took me a bit aback and a bit surprised me is that you have all your competitors there. You have a little bit of a description about what they are, and I thought you gave props to some of them, which was interesting. But then you also were quick to call them all out, and so I think you're going to have a whole list of people that are going to be coming for you guys. So what do you have to say about that? What do you have to say for the comparison of all the competitors and the kind of digs that you've given to all of them publicly on your website?
Yeah, so I forget who I originally found the exact quote from, but I know one of the other quotes that I really like in business is, if you can't be friends, can we at least be enemies? Because I think that's what really positions yourself. So I think if you really know where you stand instead of just kind of floating and trying to figure out your personality, that's one way of doing it, is by taking sides. Another way is, I think it just makes it pretty clear about where we are in comparison with our competitors. I tried to be honest and as unbiased as possible so that when people go to see, they see, hey, we try our best at a lot of things, but there's certain things that the competition does better than we do. So I'd like to give them props, because I think that's how you build trust and credibility as a new startup.
So I actually think that's brilliant. I think that move of describing exactly how you're different from your competitors and what you're trying to accomplish is great. And but I don't know if I'm the only one, but can you dig into what is CheckUp? Because you said that what you found that is not there, and you talked about the PIMS and integration with them. But what is the functionality of CheckUp, and what problem is it solving for veterinarians?
Yes. So we really got into scheduling as the start, and a lot of that was influenced based on our founding advisory team and just who we've worked with in the past, that they actually did exactly this, but in the dental space. And they grew that to 9,000 practices and successfully exited it in 2019. But through that discovery, and unlike in their situation where they were the only people who did fully integrated real-time scheduling, there are some other not only direct competitors out there that are doing that, but there are certain PIMS now that actually do that as well. So the main thing that we have focused on that is our differentiator is what we'll call the daily huddle, which basically gives you a screenshot of your previous, current, and next day of your practice, how it's performing, how it compares to goals. And then I apologize for not remembering the name of the guy who was the head of product at Airbnb, but his new startup that he is now doing is he wants to basically bring death to dashboards, because at the end of the day, everybody's now swamped with a dashboard that's got a bunch of numbers. But what ends up happening is executives go out, they hire data scientists who try and actually dissect the data and tell you what it means, and then they can use that to make decisions. So the idea behind the daily huddle is to eliminate all of that and basically just go, here's your data, here's what we suggest you do with it. And we do that through filling open time slots that you might have in your schedule. We do that through trying to improve the collection process of knowing exactly who hasn't paid you and how much they owe you. We do that through trying to make forward booking a big priority, because we think that is something that would sincerely help out veterinary practices, is if they included more forward booking in the way that they scheduled things like that.
So who is your main audience? Because the two features that I heard is appointment booking, and the one that you're proud of is the huddle. So who is the audience in the clinic? How often they look at this software in your vision, and how is it shaping their behavior?
Yeah. So the idea behind the daily huddle is going to primarily be used by the practice managers, by the owners of practices, and then we're actually currently working on a enterprise view of this, so that if you are a consolidation group or a partner group, you can easily check in on your practice's performance in real time, and you can see it based on region, based on state, however you want to break it up. But it's just a really good way of getting a pulse on how your practice is performing.
So sorry to be kind of dumb here, but I'm trying to just understand the core customer. So is it the clinic or is it the corporate level? Because that's a different huddle. And then who is the buyer and who is the user? Because if you're for the scheduling, I can understand that clinics need that, and probably as a corporate, you want to solve that problem. A lot of them buying the competitors that you compare it to, but then at the same time, there's a different product that is not related to it. That it sounds like it's more on a corporate and management level. So then the huddle is not with the hospital team; it's with the management at the hospital level or consolidator.
So I mean, technically, it can be for both. From what we've just discovered, the consolidators are the ones who are more interested in it, just because that's what they do all day, is they track that and they try and actually they're more focused on performing it, where a lot of the independent practices that I've talked to are more so working in their business instead of on their business. So while they find value in that, it's not the same point of value. But that's kind of the, I guess, fun problem we're tackling at the moment, is with a lot of the other tools like scheduling, the people who use it love it, but the people who are making the decision to put in their practice don't really care.
So maybe let's go back to the origin of the software. So you, with your co-founders, you are a group of software developers, and then there's the background in solving similar problem in a different space. So how did that port from a different space to ours, and what was the product like, and what were the driving features in that product in the dental space, I think you mentioned?
Yes. So the driving feature was real-time online scheduling, which is kind of what we started with and was our core product. And we'd still like it to be, because the initial reason that we got into this is we're all pet owners. We've all tried to go book appointments, and maybe it's just we're all from Louisiana. We might be behind the tech curve, but it's pretty frustrating to go book an appointment and you have to either fill out a request form, do all this back and forth. You might even only have to call the practice. And that's just really frustrating. Again, we're 24-year-olds. We grew up with technology. We like things to be easy and frictionless. So we were bouncing around a bunch of different ideas, and we felt that this was the need that could best be solved.
So with your background, you're all techies and you come from the technical background. What did you find the most fascinating about integrating with our current practice management systems in the veterinary domain?
We mainly found how absolutely difficult, and I don't like to bash people, but a lot of these old systems were not even written very well. And I don't know if I'm not the developer, so I can't really speak on this because they obviously write better code than I do. But I just don't think they planned far enough ahead. And maybe again, I mean, some of the software looks like it was last updated when I was 5. So maybe they just didn't know where the software was going to go. But the fact that, I mean, I think I read somewhere that Avamark is still holding strong at like 40% market share. So that was kind of part of where we saw our opportunity, is if they are loving this system and they don't want to switch, if we can figure out the key to integrating, no matter how long it takes. And for us, it took a year and a half just to get that integration through. we think people will find it extremely valuable. And so far, the practices we have worked with and talked to really love it. So I'd say we did a good job.
It's awesome, Elliot. So, how many of the practice management systems have you guys built integrations for already? And did you do that by working with one of the existing data integration platforms, or have you built all of those from the ground up?
So we have tried to build as many of them from the ground up as we can. The first one we did was Avamark, and then there's a few smaller other PIMs that we have that are cloud PIMs that they just gave us API access. But we are hoping to finish actually this week our integration with Pulse, which we built ourselves, and we're hoping to use that to then go and build our own with EasyVet, just based on how things with Pulse have been. Obviously, I know they're two different systems, they're two different companies, so they're not going to be identical, but I think this has proved that accomplishing these integrations are a lot more manageable than we thought, especially with the help of our product guy from the dental space. They built all of theirs in-house. They were able to get full integration access through that. And at least for us, for the sake of time, we do have a data partner to help us kind of plug the market demand gap while we go and build it out. So at this point, I would say the only major PIMs that we are missing would be EasyVet, but that's just because we're, one, finishing out Pulse, and then two, we just need a partner clinic who's willing to let us work with them while we build it out, which is the other hard part.
So what is the big dream behind building this?
I think the idea would be to make a lot of practices' lives easier. I think there's a lot of potential to bring veterinary medicine up with its, I would say, human medical peers in the sense of software and technology. There's a lot of cool things that we would like to do in our roadmap, but right now we're kind of just slotting in and seeing how we can be an all-in-one kind of business intelligence tool to slot into your PIMs, just because we think that's a lot of the PIMs are obviously focused on the clinical side of things, but we still think there's a lot of potential with more of the business side of things and how practices can operate better as businesses. And especially seeing that not that many that I've at least talked to, vet schools don't even teach business classes anymore. I think this is a very helpful tool that will eventually allow practices to just, whether you're independent, you can compete with a practice that's owned by a consolidator that has a ton of resources, or whether you're just looking to better optimize your current group of practices. I think that's where we fit in as your partner to help you achieve your goals.
That's really interesting. So let's get into like features. So if I'm using Vetstoria, PetsApp, Next in Line, any of these scheduling platforms today, and I'm listening to this episode, what's the promise today compared to what I might be using? Like, why are you guys so much better? You're in a pretty crowded space.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing right now is we're, at least from what we've seen, a lot of systems use, or a lot of practices use a handful of systems. And the idea right now, I've seen this a lot. And just for an example, it's probably cheaper to go with us to use Vetstoria instead of using Vetstoria and Pet Desk, since it seems like they kind of partner that together. I know they're owned by the same company, but instead of offering a bunch of different products that kind of work okay together and have varying levels of integration, because we built our own integration in-house and we pretty much have the ability to do anything with that integration. The idea is to consolidate systems down so you don't have to use so many different systems. It makes the lives of everybody at a practice easier. You're also going to save money. The best way I would say that we're trying to stand out.
So what do your current customers say? What do you hear as the feedback, and what's their direction of where they would like to see the booking platforms, and what additional features are those that landed on your roadmap from that feedback?
Yeah, so the scheduling kind of pivoted its way into the client communication side of things. We didn't really think we were going to get into this as soon as we did, but they kind of thought it would make sense that instead of having a separate way for them to send care reminders, to message with their clients, to send records, that it would be easier if that was all done in-house. So we are basically going to take what we have with that, and the eventual goal is to make practices that offer boarding, makes our real-time scheduling work just like that. So you really only have to fill out the information once. If you've been to the place before, you have it all saved. it'll just drop into the PIMS or whatever other system they're using. And then we plan to do the same thing with just easily managing every other aspect of a pet owner's health, but just a little bit more of utilizing the integration. So I think one of the easiest things, and I could be wrong, maybe some of the other systems do this, but at the very least, I think it'd be pretty helpful if you were able to schedule to pick up your pet's medication in the same way that you can on like the Walgreens app. So that's one of the other ways that we're kind of planning on expanding out and just trying to not only make things easier for pet owners, but make things easier for the clinic.
So, Elliott, if customers are looking for your solution and want to learn more about you, where can they find you and your company?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there and I respond pretty quickly to DMs there. You can find Checkup at chckup.app, chckup.app. And also, if you're listening to this podcast, we'd actually love to give you a special offer and give you half off the one-time setup fee that we do just as part of all the onboarding and just kind of making sure everything runs smoothly. So instead of paying $990, you get it for $495. Just say, hey, I heard you on the Veterinary Innovation podcast. Yeah.
Well, I think we're running out of time, as usually we do. We usually ask 2 questions at the end. What is the book, TED Talk, YouTube video, or anything interesting that you've listened or read recently that you would suggest to our listeners?
So I forget the name of the author, and I always do this, but it's one of the best books that I love and love to recommend, especially because of how old it is and it still holds up, is Selling Ice to Eskimos. And it's by the guy who used to manage the New Jersey Nets. And the Nets were like the worst NBA team at the time from a just business standpoint. And he basically turned them around to being like in the top 5 highest selling teams. But he has got a bunch of very unique, creative ideas on what you can do to not only stand out, but to actually improve the customer experience that you have. He would sit in the nosebleeds. He would ride the bus and the shuttles from all the parking lots. Like he actually was like, he really cared about the experience more than a lot of probably sports team managers did at the time. So I highly recommend that book.
Awesome. And Elliott, last question is another innovator in the space that we're in that you'd recommend we have on the show.
Yeah, I would probably say, so I've spoken with Peter Verrill, who I think is doing a lot of exciting things at Heartland. I think he's a great guy to talk to. He's got a lot of interesting stories that you would only expect from somebody who has traveled so much across the world for work. But he is very knowledgeable, but he also can tell a story, which I think is what really matters when you're doing something either innovative or you're doing something just that's a little too complicated. If you can concisely explain something, I think that really speaks volumes.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryin.podcast.com. See you next week.